Hi everybody, I'm Cara Santa Maria, the senior science correspondent for the Huffington Post, and we just wrapped a special atheist episode of The Point with my friends here, Michael Shermer, Sean Carroll, and Edward Falzon. And we previously solicited some questions from folks on Twitter, on Facebook, and we wanted to answer some of them for you today. So I want to start with one from, I'm not making this up, at Birthing Vaginas. Yep. And she asks, as an atheist, do you feel your beliefs are superior to other faiths? We could probably spend an hour on this, so we're going to try to keep it short. I know Sean has something to say about this.
Yes. I do believe that the things I believe to be true are more likely to be true than the things I believe not to be true. In fact, I suspect everybody believes that. It is weird that atheists get this accusation that you think what you believe is true. How can you do that? And I think that if people didn't believe what they thought was true, they would have different sets of beliefs. So I think that the beliefs I have, I try to get to by combinations of reason and evidence, and I think that everyone should do that. And the great thing about scientifically based beliefs is you're willing to update them if better evidence or better logic comes along. So I think that the beliefs I currently have are the ones that I think are most likely to be true, but I'm happy to change them if you give me a good reason.
But I have to say that fundamentally my atheism I define as a lack of belief. I don't think of my atheism as a belief system or a faith. I think of atheism as the exact, not opposite, but yeah, non-existence of belief. And I'm not talking about all of the things I think as I get through my life. Obviously, I do have beliefs, and I'm sure that Michael could talk about this for hours based on his last book, The Believing Brain. But definitely my atheism, I define as a lack of belief.
Yeah, so you have to believe something. We have to believe all sorts of things. So what sorts of beliefs are we going to structure society on that makes it more moral, that makes us all more prosperous, that makes violence decline, that makes morality increase, and so on? And that we can measure. That's an empirical question. She's actually asking an empirical question, and the answer is secular systems are far superior than religious systems. Across the board, secular democracies are superior to any theocracy, any dictatorship, anything like that, in anything you want to measure. Rates of crime, rates of prosperity, and so forth. Just look at North versus South Korea. And so treatment of women, treatment of children, treatment of minorities, treatment of Jews, blacks, so I just go right down the line. And religions have always been about a couple of decades behind the shift that happens because of secular government changes. And so it's a measurable, quantifiable answer.
All right, well on that note, let's move on to our next question. This one is from Matt Toaz, I think is how you'd pronounce it. I apologize if that's wrong, Matt. My wife and I are non-believers. I was brought up Catholic and my wife's sort of Protestant. We're expecting our first child. We've decided to raise our children with our beliefs, not our parents. Her parents are fine with it, mine not so much. Any suggestions on peaceably getting through this with my parents? This is kind of a Dear Atheist Abby situation.
Mom, Dad, you had your kids and these are mine. I mean,
I like that.
I don't know how else
Can you quote the Bible? Does the Bible say that at some point?
But then I guess the fear there is, do you leave, I think a lot of times when grandparents want to be really involved with the children and you leave them, to babysit, whatever, like what do you do? How do you express to your parents, like, I do not want you indoctrinating my children?
Don't tell them about Jesus while we're at the movies.
Exactly. And that's something that's really difficult because it's so ingrained. I have this struggle with my father a lot. I love my father and I know he loves me, but he's fundamentally a Mormon and I am fundamentally an atheist. And when it comes down to it, even though we've grown a lot since we first had our falling out and we've kind of come back together and we can talk about things now, I still know that there's this undercurrent, not so much of like contempt, there's an undercurrent of feeling sorry for one another. You know what I mean? That's always kind of there because he sees his way as the true way, the same as I do. And so it's like, he feels like he has a moral obligation to show me the way. I can tell that. He truly believes what he believes.
If you're a true religious believer, you do have a moral obligation to convince people that you're right, because you know you're right. This is the problem with religious faith. The logical conclusion is you must not tolerate other beliefs. You might, by temperament, be a tolerant person, and we're lucky you don't shoot people or something.
Yeah.
But the logic of it is that you really shouldn't be tolerant.
And then you find yourself at an impasse when you have a situation like this.
Well, for the kids, I mean, maybe you should live up to your atheist ideals and use the force of reason and say, you know, to the grandparents, you know, we don't believe this, but we're gonna raise our kids, like you say, as we want to raise them. And to the kids, say, you know what, your grandparents believe in these things that we don't believe in. You're gonna hear them talk about it, and you can hear us talk about it, and you can make your own decisions based on logic and evidence.
Yeah.
I think you can inoculate kids against this kind of inculcation by teaching them concepts of logic and science and reason and maths.
Yeah, and they get these things much earlier than I think most people assume that they would. You know, you can definitely bring up children thinking about, you know, bring them up with critical problem-solving skills and teaching them logic puzzles and things that are age-appropriate.
Teach them stories from the Bible, along with Hans Christian Andersen, along with Mother Goose.
Exactly, so that they see that there's no difference.
I mean, you know,
in the fiction.
In Aboriginal Dreamtime, they have these stories about how the giraffe got its trunk, and how the giraffe got its neck, how the elephant got its trunk, about, you know, trying to reach trees and things, and it's purely fantasy. When you throw in the Tower of Babel, this is why we have, you know, all the different languages and physiology in the world, and throwing in all of these concepts as fairy tales and teach them that it is just stories, but some people think this one's true, some people think this one's true. There's a great book by Richard Dawkins, of course, one of his latest books, The Magic of Reality. It's targeting kids. It talks about myths, it talks about the wonders of science and the predictability of the scientific approach as opposed to the lack of predictability of all the other myths. Read that to your kids every night.
There you go, that's the advice. Buy Dawkins' book. So I've got another one here. I want to just go over this one briefly. This question drives me insane. So I want to just set the record right now. We can answer it and move on. From Stephen DeLuca, I love you, but he asks, why put up with all the trials and tribulations of living if there is nothing after this? Why not just end it? All of us have received this question multiple times, I'm sure. I do not understand the logic of this question. If you're an atheist, why not just kill yourself? I always want to flip the script and say, if you're Christian, why not just kill yourself? Because you know you're going to go to heaven, right? Why would you deal with the pains of earth if you think that you're going to go to some great place where everything's happy and warm and fuzzy all the time? I don't think there's anything after this, man. I want to squeeze the life out of this.
Well, I think that's a great point to make, that knowing that your life will end and there's a finite number of years makes the life that we have much more precious. It's not the dress rehearsal, this is the performance, and we should, you know, do it well. But I also don't want to denigrate the question. I think that this is a good question to ask. Okay, we've gotten rid of the myths and the angels and the supernatural. Why are we here? What should we make of this life that we have? I think it was Emil Durkheim who said that the question of suicide is the fundamental question for the social studies, social sciences. What difference does it make if we continue to live our lives? And it's not just a philosophical question, it's a practical question, because we don't in this country right now have a grown-up, mature dialogue about end of life.
You're right, we really don't.
The issues that come up.
Yeah.
And we can't, as long as our beliefs about the end of life are rooted in a set of untrue beliefs about the world.
That's true, because almost any atheist you speak with will be for assisted suicide. You know, obviously, when somebody's in pain.
And we need to do it right.
Yeah,
and we can't have that discussion if we don't allow it.
We all do it for our pets. We would think that we would give our loved ones the same kind of dignity. But it's actually the religious people who don't want to have that conversation.
The conversation always ends up with, oh, well, if we have assisted suicide, then some depressed 17-year-old wants to kill themselves, they can go into any doctor's office and get a hot shot. And this is not the discussion that anyone's trying to have.
Exactly.
But it always goes down to that.
That's true. All right, so let's move on to a question from a good friend of mine, Casey Anderson, who's actually a Nat Geo explorer, and he asks, many religions believe that humans have dominion over animals. What's an atheist's view when it pertains to the human-animal relationship?
We're all cousins, and we have stewardship only because we're the only animal on the planet that has the capacity of stewardship, which is lucky because we're the animals on the planet that have fucked the planet up so badly that it now requires stewardship. Is that all right with you guys? It's about,
I mean, it's an animal-animal relationship, right? We are animals.
We are animals,
ourselves.
exactly.
And I think that again, we don't want to make the assumption that because nature works in a certain way, it's the right way for it to work. We have the capability to screw up the planet in ways that other animals can't, and that gives us a bit of responsibility to try to do a good job. I don't think that there is a set atheist view of the human-animal relationship. I think that's part of the dialogue we should be having.
Yeah, of course. I mean, but as atheists, again, most of us, I think, are going to stick to scientific principles. So as atheists, we all know that we too are animals, and we don't think that, you know, God created us as somehow separate and better than, right? So at least we can start with that premise. We are animals. We may have intellectual capacities that exceed those of animals, but we also, like you said, kind of have a responsibility to, especially with domesticated animals. Especially.
Yeah,
well, we are different.
And the expansion of the sentiments of who we consider worthy of proper treatment has been expanding for 2 centuries. Really, since the Enlightenment put forth the idea that we should not treat other people as means to an ends, but as an ends to themselves. We've now included, say, primates and dolphins, and just the treatment, the cruel treatment of any animal. You know, we have laws about that now. Yeah. And so that's good news. And you know, I don't know if we want to give rights to dogs. You know, dogs aren't going to vote. You know,
but welfare.
But just proper treatment, kind treatment, and that we're getting better at, only because in a scientific worldview, you take a shades of gray that clearly is a continuum because we're genetically related.
50 Shades?
Yeah, at least 50.
I wouldn't do that to a dog. Come on.
Okay, I want to get at least one more in, maybe 2. But this one is from somebody on my Facebook named John Taylor, and I kind of edited it down, sorry, because he was very flattering to me, but I didn't want to read all of that out loud. In atheist groups, they always consist of a bunch of mostly old men. You are very nice middle-aged men, but you are mostly men. In atheism, we don't have a rule that makes a woman worth only 50% as much as a man, and we don't make women stay silent and only ask their husbands questions. We in atheism supposedly treat women as equal, so why isn't the gender split closer to 50-50 as it should be? And I think that this is a valid question. I personally don't have any statistics on this, but I can tell you in my experience when putting together this episode and putting together this panel, I had a hell of a time finding a woman who would be willing to sit on the panel with me and talk about her atheism. Why is that?
I think it probably really is 50-50. It's who wants to stand up and talk about it.
That's really
go on shows about it, go to conferences and speak about it. Who's intellectually active about it. It's more of a guy thing.
Why do you think it's more of a guy thing? I mean, because I don't get it. I don't get it because for me it's a me thing, and I'm a girl, so I don't know why other girls don't see it as being a girl thing.
But there is self-reinforcement because then we don't invite women to give talks at the atheist conventions, and then we don't know who they are. And I think that the men need to do some positive outreach here to support and bring up the women who are willing to talk about it and are interested in the subject. I think the AJ's little video was fantastic.
Yeah, I was going to say, the video on the long form of this episode, we heard from AJ Johnson, who's the development director for American Atheists, and she was really outspoken. It was a great video, so you should check it out.
Yeah, and at the last, Randy's last meeting, his big conference, we had more women speakers than men speakers, first time ever. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Right, now it's skepticism, so it incorporates a lot of different things, but.
And you're seeing the same thing in the sciences. There are less women in the sciences, but it's growing. We're seeing more now in the social sciences than men. We're definitely seeing more in the biological sciences. It's getting better in physics. Engineering and math are probably still the lowest, but it is getting there. So it maybe isn't a specific problem to atheist groups. It's just kind of across the board.
We don't need equality of outcome. We need equality of opportunity.
Exactly.
It's, the women who want to be physicists or who want to speak out about atheism should have just as much opportunity to do that as the men. And I think that right now maybe they don't, either for institutional reasons or just for they don't feel that it's their place reasons because the social pressures on them. And we should work to reduce those social pressures.
I have heard some just anecdotally that it's partly there might be actually an imbalance of women to men in atheism for emotional reasons. Women, I'm told, maybe somebody can help me out with this, are more inclined to hang on to their faith, to hang on to it for emotional reasons than men.
It's a hypothesis, right?
I've heard
I think
this
probably
only
it's more like
anecdotally.
Justification of faith. Guys are more likely to say, I believe in God because of intelligent design, and they'll spout the arguments that sound rational. And women are probably more in tune to the real reason people believe, emotional need and comfort, social reasons, and so on.
Good call, yeah. Okay, so I want to ask one last question. This is from Matt in Ogden, Utah. This is kind of a light one. Ended on a light note. Do you think that atheists should start their own church so they can get together and sing atheist songs, tell atheist stories, philosophize atheist morals, collect atheist PAC money, get atheist tax exemptions, and organize atheist service projects?
Well, that is kind of done already. The Universalist Unitarians are pretty much atheists for the most part. They don't call themselves that.
But what about a group that did call
Skeptics
themselves
groups,
atheists?
and there are
Skeptics
atheist
groups are
yeah.
great, but you know, I think that's the one thing that we're missing. I mean, the whole thing about a church and singing atheist songs is kind of tongue-in-cheek, but you know, collecting like lobby money. You know, we are a big group, maybe not atheists explicitly, but people who consider themselves non-believers. It's hanging around 15%. I mean, that's a huge group. We should have more influence in Congress.
It's a complicated question also because even though I do think that science and religion come into conflict where claims about how the world works are concerned, science is not a replacement for religion. There's a lot of things that religion does that science doesn't pretend to do and will never do. And there's social aspects and there's community aspects and things like that.
Not manning the soup kitchens.
Yeah, well, you know, charity is
Right.
one good example.
Yeah, but there are plenty of secular charities. There are plenty of secular groups that it doesn't have to be a science versus religion. There's fact versus non-fact as far as science and religion goes. But then there's the community side of it. We have plenty of these groups that have these support systems. We have plenty of groups that have the get together and have pizza and watch movies.
Yeah, the great things that people get from having a social structure around religion isn't about the religion.
Not at all.
It's about going to church every week and having friends.
You know, there is a growing movement of
animal.
skeptics and atheists in the pub all over the country. Wherever I go to speak, it's always like, let's go drinking afterwards. Like, wow, okay.
That sounds like way more fun than going to church. Anyway.
You do get to have a sip of wine at church too if you go to the right church.
Not the Mormon church, they drink water.
Water? Seriously?
Water and bread.
Water?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah, the blood of Christ is water.
But I think we should be fair and admit that something is lost when we get rid of religion. We should get rid of religion because it's based on a bunch of untrue beliefs, but it served a whole bunch of purposes in society. And as many groups as there are, and I love the groups.
They absconded the purposes in society and claimed them for their own.
I completely
That's a completely
agree.
different thing.
And also,
we can't say that religion is responsible for community gatherings. I mean, that's just nonsense. There's a point where
that role.
And they also served a role pre-scientifically, which we don't need anymore.
Absolutely.
You
I'm
know,
not in
so-
favor of keeping religion around, but we're not going to go to our atheist meetings every Sunday morning. You know, that was something that I'm totally against, you know, doing that. And we live in a world with different kinds of communication, different kinds of social mobility. There are real issues about how to form communities in the world. Forget about religion versus atheism or anything like that. And I don't think that it is atheism's job to fulfill
Exactly,
those
and I mean,
roles.
because then what we see is kind of that famous South Park episode about atheism, where it really does just kind of fulfill the same role as religion. And then everybody's like, well, if you're not an atheist, you know, I'm going to be against you. And so that's true. You know, well, check it out. I want to go ahead and thank you guys again for being here with me, Edward Falzon, Sean Carroll, and Michael Shermer. I'm Cara Santa Maria, and click on over and check out the full-length episode of Atheism on the Point.